Hi everyone, welcome to my channel. I'm going to be doing a 3-part series on the lessons and insights that I have learned from having 7 physical pop-up concept stores for Janet's List. We've had anything from 10 days to 3 weeks long, and having done that so many times, the lessons that I want to share. Now, it's going to be in 3 parts. This one is going to focus on strategy, the next one is going to focus on the operational aspects, and the third one is going to focus on more of the softer stuff, mindset, growth, etc. When it comes to strategy, what I mean in this context is the approach and the choices that you will make as an independent business. Maybe you're watching this and you're from a bigger brand. Either way, that's what the focus is on, and it is specifically for physical pop-up concept stores. I'm not covering broader strategic choices or decisions. This is really focused on pop-ups. And I think the thing with strategy is it should hurt a little bit, because there should be some choices that you're making, which means that you're picking X instead of Y, because you cannot do everything. When you try to do everything with your strategy is when it all goes wrong. So it's really important at an early stage to take a step back and think to yourself, what is my strategy going to be? And obviously strategy is very broad, so I'm just going to cover 5 things which I think are the sorts of strategic choices that I've had to make, and the strategic aspects which are worth considering. Let's get straight into it. So the most important decision you're going to make when it comes to your physical pop-up is the space. The actual space, the location, where it is, that is the most critical decision. And because of that, it is then a strategic decision. You need to make this decision early, because everything else is going to hinge on that. The press, all of the different arrangements, the operational aspects, the logistics, everything is going to hinge on the location that you select. There are very many elements that you will have to consider when making the choice about where to have your physical pop-up. Some of the strategic decisions I make around space are, if I have X amount of budget, I'm going to spend the most money that I can to get the best space that I can. So for me as a small independent business, that looks like perhaps I might not be able to afford a space on the high street, but I am going to get a space that is very close to the high street. Number 2, I am going to find a space that is as close to the tube as possible, but also in a location that makes it very easy for people to visit, or they can visit when they are doing something else. So for example, in Soho, that was an easy location because people are going to be coming to Oxford Street at some point to do their Christmas shopping. So thinking about things like that. A less obvious strategic decision I make is I pick the landlord. So a bit like when people are talking about investing and they're like, choose your investors carefully, I pick my landlords very carefully, because what you want is that when something goes wrong, you have someone who is quick, who is dependable, who will come and sort you out immediately. So maybe that's a less obvious decision, but for me, picking a space is also about picking the landlord. A big element of strategy is timing. You might have the best product or service, but if you present it to people at a time that doesn't work, then that's a way that you can lose out. When strategically, if you picked your time correctly, that's a winning strategy. I'll give you a good example. When I think back to my first pop-up in Shoreditch many years ago, there is very little that I would change. Honestly, I look back and I'm amazed that I was able to pull that off. But if you ask me if there was one decision I would change, it is about timing. So I picked the timing broadly right, in the sense that I knew if I was going to have a physical shop, I wanted it to be in December during the Christmas season, because that's naturally when people are going to be buying more, they're going to be out and about in the shops, they might be looking for unique gifts for their friends and their loved ones, and that was a need we would be able to meet in our physical pop-up. And so I got the timing of the year right, December. I got the location right, Shoreditch, makes sense. It also fed into my broader strategy of wanting our shops to be in mainstream physical locations. However, in picking the dates, I actually had a little bit of choice as to the dates. And I went from the 1st to the 16th of December, just because I just thought it sounded nice to say my pop-up starting right at the start of December. Knowing what I know now, I would have picked the last 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, because actually when you look at the tail and you look at the numbers, the amount of sales that you do the closer you get to Christmas increase. So if I knowing now what I didn't know then, I would have definitely had the timing for my pop-up shop in those last 2 weeks leading up to Christmas, because I know that we would have pulled more money in our tails. And I know this because In later years, when we had Christmas pop-ups, I changed my strategy on timing, and I always have my pop-up running right up to, the 23rd of December. And you can just see the difference in terms of sales and last minute shoppers, and you being able to meet that need that people have. Just on the point around strategy and location, there's so many times I can think back where I looked at a particular location and it fit really well within the budget. But then when I looked at other factors like the size of the space or where the space was located or ease of access, I was like, actually, I'd rather continue the search and spend more money from within my budget and figure out what else I'm going to cut, because at the end of the day, I feel like the location of that space, or maybe the finish of the space, or even the landlord I was dealing with, or even the dates that they had available made more sense. So there's always going to be a trade-off. Like I said in the introduction, strategy, when you make the right strategic decisions, it should hurt a little because they're trade-offs. You're picking one thing over the other. The key is to figure out which call you need to make and make it the right call for you and your business. The second aspect you need to consider when it comes to strategy for your pop-up is the purpose of your pop-up, because this also is going to determine some of the other decisions that you make. Are you trying to test a new product? Are you trying to discover and gain new customers, perhaps different ones from the ones who regularly visit your website? Are you trying to bring your brand to life in a physical space? Are you trying to prove the concept of your business? Are you trying to do this as a marketing and branding approach? You need to really sit down and think what your purpose is and then use that to determine all of the other decisions. So for me with Janet's List, it was very much about bringing my brand to life, doing something that I hadn't seen and that hadn't been done, which would give me a unique selling point. And I'm going to cover that in the next bit. It was also about testing the thesis that I had, that people were interested in brands by Black women and women of color, and that there was a sense that people wanted to be conscious consumers. I wanted to prove that thesis. Also, from a branding and marketing perspective, I knew that Janet's List had a strong brand, but I needed to extend that brand by bringing us to a physical space, and then that would also be a unique thing that would enable us to get more eyeballs, get more press, get more interest in the business. And so just really sitting down and working out what your purpose is and then using that to drive the decisions that you make is something worth considering. So for example, as jewelry designer, perhaps your purpose is, I just want people to see how I approach my work. I just want to see how people respond to my work in person because I usually sell online and I don't know what people say about my work. You might not need a huge shop or space to be able to do that. Perhaps you just need a small, beautiful space in a street with a lot of footfall, a lot of traffic, something where one or two people can come in and have an intimate conversation with you. That's different from a brand that perhaps has a whole range of new products that they want to test and they want to see how people react to those in person. That's going to determine the type of space, the length of the pop-up, and the approach that they take. So it's important to take the time to work out what your purpose is, because that's going to determine all of the other decisions regarding your pop-up. While we're at it, please take a minute to like and subscribe to our Janet's List YouTube channel. We're a smaller channel and we've heard that this makes a huge difference in getting our content out in these YouTube streets. The third point I'd make around strategy is having a very unique selling point, but also thinking about how that aligns with your brand. For anyone who's thinking of having a pop-up in a physical space, if you don't have a strong visual brand, if someone can't go to your online shop and get a sense of the vibe of your business, it might be a little bit too early for you to have a physical pop-up. However, if people come to your online spaces and they have a very clear vibe, then having a physical space is a way to really enhance that and to build on that with having people with their energy to come in and you can have that exchange and it's all wonderful. Now, going back to the point about a unique selling point, there are so many different small businesses, independent businesses out there. Even for Janet's List, given what we do, which is quite unique, there are still other businesses that do the same sort of thing. So what you want to do is make sure that you have a really unique selling point. And this is why timing is important. When we had our first pop-up in 2018, we were literally the first physical pop-up that had featured all brands by Black women and women of color from the UK. Nobody else had done it. So that alone just put us in a really strong position in terms of getting press, in terms of getting our story out and about on social media. Even when customers came into the shop, they either came in because they were Black women and women of color and they were like, oh my God, I've never seen this anywhere else before. Or they came in because they knew nothing. And this is people from all walks of life, not just Black people and people of color. Anyone from any walk of life coming in, just being like, this shop looks really interesting. And I've come in to find out what's happening there. And then through that conversation, they understand what the mission and vision is of your business. If you have a unique selling point, it makes everything so much more easier. I remember one of my favorite customers, Liz, who has come to every pop-up that we've had. The very first time, she said she was on the tube reading Stylist magazine, and then she heard about Janet's List, and she literally changed her direction and came straight to the pop-up. I remember because she was one of the first customers who came in on that day. That is the power of a unique selling point. If you do that, it means everything else works for you and you don't have to work as hard to bring people into your space. So it is important at that strategic level to really sit down and think, what is the unique offering that I'm going to be giving to people in this space? And does my brand support this? And is my brand mature enough to carry this? That's what you should be thinking about. The fourth point that I'm going to make, and in many ways this is the most important point when it comes to a physical space, is your team. It is so important at an early stage to start to identify who your team is going to be in your physical space. For lots of people coming from online into physical, you're used to running things on your own or with a very lean team. When you're in a physical space, it's completely different. You need as many hands on deck as you can. You need to accept all of the help that you can. You need to very quickly work with a group of people, play to their strengths, identify the areas where they shine, and allow them to do that without micromanaging. And also, one thing as a founder is it's actually not that easy to delegate. So for you to be able to delegate tasks, you need to trust the team that you have. So what can you do about this from a strategic point? Try and find people before you need them. Try and build those relationships way before you need them. For the first pop-up, I think I spoke to the PR person almost 9 months before I actually engaged her. For people in my team, like Funsha, who's sitting behind the camera, all it took was an email and I was like, this is someone who needs to be in my team. Adonica, who's my friend who helped out in the first pop-up, I'm like, oh my goodness, she's here on a weekend, giving up her time. She must absolutely love this. But on top of that, I was learning from her in terms of sales because she's such a strong person when it comes to sales. Your team are your most important asset. So really take the time to sit down at an early stage and think, if I'm running this pop-up, who am I going to have? What are they going to be doing? And how do I play to their strengths and get the most out of them in this sort of tight situation? The other thing as well with team is always making sure that you have contingencies. So that if someone is not available or if someone is, if something goes wrong, then you know that you have cover. Because without the team, you don't really have a physical pop-up. So that's why I'd say that it is an aspect of strategy that you really need to spend some time on. And this brings me to my fifth and final point, which is about having an operational playbook. Now, this is such an important point and such a sort of big point on its own that I'm going to cover the operational and tactical aspects in a separate video. So look out for that. It's going to be the second video in this series. I always say, as a lawyer, cases were won and lost in chambers. So it's not in court where you go and give a glowing performance. It's actually all of the preparation and the planning that you do before you get to that stage. Now, with your first pop-up, it's really tempting to just sort of figure it out as you go along. Don't do that. Start really early. Start creating a playbook. So it's like, okay, in branding, A, B, C, D, E. This is the checklist that we need. This is how we do things. Start to create backups and contingencies. Start to document all of the different processes that you have leading up to the event. I would say one of the things that is a real determinant of businesses that succeed or physical experiences that succeed is when all of the operational aspects of it are running smoothly. It's like one of those things where when things are going well, no one notices, but when things go wrong, everybody notices. When things are smooth and they're going well in your physical space, that actually contributes to your bottom line. That actually contributes to customer enjoyment. That actually contributes to team enjoyment. So it is important to take the time to really button down your operational procedures and processes. Make sure that all of that stuff is up to scratch. Make sure you do the learning, watching YouTube, reading books, talking to people who've had physical pop-ups before, talking to the other shops that are in the same location that you're in. Like things I've done, I've literally sat down across the road from prospective pop-ups just to look and to understand like how people interacting with the space, how do people come in and out of the other shops. You cannot do too much research. But it's not just about the research, it's then turning that into operational ways of working, which means that you can run things smoothly when your pop-up is up and going. So I just touched on the operational aspect, but if you want to find out more about that, watch this next video because I lean into the specific operational learnings and insights that I have gained from 7 physical pop-up stores. That brings me to the end of this video. If you're watching this and you've had to make strategic decisions in your business, I want to hear more. Please let me know, leave some comments in the description box below. You might have questions or comments or insights that you want to share. Please feel free to share that in the comments below. Thank you so much for spending time with me, and I shall see you in the next video.